But from here, I share a study to justify myself and my claim, and I then break down and challenge the study that he shared, which shows the study's reviewed analysis generally involved in suboptimal protein intakes consumed as part of a low-energy diet. I'm sorry, Dr. Aric, but that study does not justify your claim against intermittent fasting or disprove my point here. Alright, here we go, world. Calling out Dr. Aric Sudicky. Sudicky, I don't know. But let's just get right into it. What is going on, world? In this video, I'm going to be sharing a personal interaction with a doctor. Yes, a real family doctor from my city here in London, Ontario, who actually went to Western University. And I'm going to break down why you can't trust him and why you should also heavily question the advice that you are getting from your family doctor. Now, this video in no way is meant to try to ruin Dr. Aric's reputation in the world. I have no intention at all to try to get people to seek him out and discredit his legitimacy as a doctor, but he is a doctor, and I find what he did very irresponsible in his position of authority. And if his reputation is ruined by sharing this interaction I had with him online, then so be it. But I believe sharing this interaction with the world is very important, so in this video I will use 3 points to discredit and say why I believe you shouldn't trust Dr. Aric Sudicky. So the point number 1 is doctors are human beings and they can make mistakes as well. So I don't believe that they should be going out in the world or online, or in this instance making a sponsored video, so paying for an ad on a video, telling people what to do without mentioning that the advice they are giving is coming from very limited research and data, which I will lightly cover here, but in general everything you can find in the description box below or in the blog post that I made from our interaction. And number 2 is that doctors can be ignorant to other scientific research that challenges their current perspective in the world. And I will heavily be using Dr. Aric as an example of one doctor out in the world who definitely does this. And number 3 is that doctors don't actually look in the research they are using to give you advice, and we should question what research they are using to be giving us long-term health advice in regards to nutrition, diet, and our lifestyles. So basically, using those 3 points, I'm going to make a claim that this doctor, Dr. Aric, as well as a lot of doctors out there in the world, are basing their claims off studies that are very limited, or they don't even bother looking into them in the first place. Now, this video will not be about me and my beliefs in regards to intermittent fasting and why I believe it's an optimal lifestyle regimen for optimizing your overall hormone production in your body, which leads to increased growth hormone levels, which then leads to increased testosterone levels, which over time leads to more increased muscle growth, which is basically the subject of what I'm challenging Dr. Aric on here. But if you would like more information on my views here, you can see the several videos in the description box below, and I will also be making a follow-up video to this, breaking down and challenging common research that I've been finding many of these online doctors are trying to use to justify their beliefs on growth hormone and muscle growth. In the next video I plan on making after this, I will be challenging BioLane, or Lane Norton, who I find is rather aggressive and discrediting to anyone who challenges his research who isn't a doctor. He basically tries to publicly shame anyone who challenges him, which I think is very irresponsible of him as a doctor. And he also uses scientific research that is 20 to 25 years old, is very limited in time, the longest one going for about 4 months, and has rather small sample group sizes of about 20 people, and half of those are placebo, so we're only really testing 10 people to get the results in the claims that they are using to tell you what to do with yourself and with your life. I personally don't believe that this proves him right and gives him the right to state these claims without mentioning that the research he's using is very limited. So it's more or less a belief that has some light evidence breaking it up. But when presented with perspectives that challenge those beliefs, he basically freaks out like a child and says, well, you didn't go to school for this, so what gives you the right to talk about it? Well, in the next few videos I'm about to create here, I'm going to break down and challenge you guys and your closed-mindedness and your closed-minded perspectives on all the scientific research that is currently out there in the world. But anyways, let's dive into why you can't trust Dr. Aric Sudicky. So as I was scrolling through my Facebook feed the other day, I came upon a sponsored video from Dr. Aric with the headline, "Can you grow muscle while intermittent fasting?" Now, I'm not going to share the whole video in an effort to save time. Go check it out on his page, because even after all this whole interaction here, he still has it up. But he makes the claim that...
So I had a good question from somebody who asked if it's ideal to be intermittently fasting if one of their goals is to grow muscle.
So, he uses the justification that...
It depends. It depends on how high on your list growing muscle sits.
To answer this man's question on if intermittent fasting is ideal for muscle growth. Now, if you know me, health and fitness are not my primary goals in life, although it may appear to be. It's a background thing that just goes on because I've developed the knowledge behind it and I know how to carry it out in my life. But personally, I want to create, I want to write books, and honestly, I want to challenge and change the way we scientifically test human beings, because through these upcoming videos, I'm going to show that there's a lot of flaws within it. But in general, yes, my main goal in life isn't to grow muscle, but I do want to know that every day I'm taking the steps to put my body into a state so that when I do step into the gym, that I'm getting the maximum results I can. And when I'm not in the gym, again, I'm still maximizing my results. Now, as a doctor, shouldn't your primary goal in life be helping your patients? Or while you're in medical school, shouldn't your primary goal be acquiring as much information as you possibly can and looking into it as deeply as you can? Why and how your main goal as a doctor is to grow muscle is just kind of ridiculous to me. And as a doctor, I would hope that he would be giving advice from that type of a mentality of, look, there's other things to be achieving in life, so you kind of want to optimize your whole body and your mind, not just be focusing only on muscle.
It depends.
So his depends here is just a little wishy-washy for me, but let's go ahead with it for now.
When you intermittently fast, of course, you go extended periods without calories, including protein. But we know that there's multiple factors to consider when trying to grow muscle.
So here, he willingly acknowledges that yes, there are other factors that affect muscle growth. And we got to remember this because this is important for later.
Yes, one factor is your total daily protein consumption. So in a perfect world, even if you're intermittently fasting, you can squeeze enough protein into a very small feeding window every day.
Now this is where he's starting to get to me, because he's saying here, from this statement, he's making the claim that in only a perfect world can you get enough protein in daily to benefit muscle growth while you're doing intermittent fasting. That's basically the whole basis of his premise here, which is just silly to me. Just because you are eating in a shorter window throughout the day, that doesn't mean you need to live in this perfect world in order to get your required protein in. It's actually very doable, but this is the basis that Dr. Aric really focuses on when trying to drive his point home. Now, we'll get back to Dr. Aric, and this is a little tangential from the whole discussion, but from my own experiences and my own experimentation on my own body, my lifestyle and everything, I don't believe your total daily anything really matters. Whether that's macronutrients like your protein or your vitamins and minerals or your calories, I believe, and what I've been experimenting with on my own body for the last few years, is what I like to call calorie manipulation. And you can also do macronutrient manipulation and vitamin intake manipulation. So let's say your total daily caloric intake is 2,500 calories, and that keeps your body fat level maintained. You don't gain fat, you don't lose fat. Perfect. You just eat that every single day and you stay the same. I believe you don't need to eat 2,500 calories every single day just to maintain your body. Instead of looking at it so binary and closed-minded on this daily level that you have to do everything, you can look at it throughout the week and say, hey, look, technically I need 17,500 calories to maintain my body. But if I want to grow muscle, I also want to be putting myself in a caloric surplus, right? To help with recovery and muscle growth. But then I also want to stay nice and lean to maintain all that hard work I've been putting in. So I want to be in a caloric deficit. So what do I do here? Well, again, instead of thinking it so binary like these doctors seem to do when they're looking at this research, you can say, hey, I'm going to eat 2,300 calories for 4 days and bank 200 calories every single day. So you have an extra 800 calories to work with throughout the week. Plus, you're getting these amazing benefits that happen when you put yourself in a caloric deficit.
If I take any organism on the planet Earth, from yeast cells to spiders, insects, rabbits, dogs, and I reduce their caloric intake by 30%, they live 30% longer. The only organism which has not yet been deliberately tested by scientists are Homo sapiens.
That's a whole separate video that I'm not even going to talk about here. Go check that out in the description box below. Living a situational lifestyle. Then I can eat 2,500 calories the one day. Keep it at maintenance. But then I can also do something like have a cheat or refeed day where I have 4,000 calories come into my system and into my body, and then follow that with a lower calorie day, like 1,800 calories, because really, after a cheat day or a refeed day, should you be eating in maintenance or even in a surplus? I personally don't think so, and that's what I've been experimenting with. But if you see there, I'm still getting 17,500 calories throughout the week. So technically, my body is maintaining, while I'm still getting both amazing sides of the coin by putting myself in a caloric deficit for long-term disease prevention and life longevity, while I'm also getting the amazing benefits of being in a surplus for a few days. Now, this isn't scientific, of course. We can't prove this down to the cell, and it's because our current systems to scientifically test human beings are flawed. This here is a theory that I've been experimenting with on my own body that is based off researching and studying many other people over the years who have documented their own experiences while experimenting around with manipulating their nutrition and their food intake, like Steve Maxwell, for instance. But this is just how I live my life and how I've been experimenting for the last 2 to 4 years, and I've been finding great results. But this stuff is also long-term. We don't have studies that prove that this stuff works yet. And why? Because, as Dr. Aric mentioned, there are many other factors that affect muscle growth.
However, there's other factors that grow into maximizing hypertrophy.
I've been going along for the last 2 to 4 years without strict calorie counting, and I believe it can be done with protein as well as vitamins and nutrients by manipulating what you eat on certain days and just being aware of what you're doing. Like, for instance, having a carnivore day where you eat a higher amount of protein and you're obviously going to get more fat in on that day. But then having a carb or fat day for your cheat or refeed days. And on those 4 days where I was saying you eat in a slight caloric deficit, I believe on those days you should be eating clean, whole, healthy foods that don't have any kind of extra additives in it. Now, I know that was a little tangential there, but I want to show that there are other theories and concepts out in the world that we are not even close to being able to test yet because we're still following these old patterns, and we still have doctors and researchers and scientists out there who are thinking so close-minded and so binary.
It depends.
They look at it in this closed system of you have to do this daily, you have to eat this every single day, and do this every single day.
Total daily protein consumption.
But we as humans, we just don't function like that. We have days off, we travel, we celebrate, or unfortunately family death or illness occurs, which takes us off our path at times. So unless you're going to step on stage, muscle growth, I believe, is just not anyone's primary goal in life. And then along with this as well too is that, look, Dr. Aric, you're just a human being just like I am. But everything I'm sharing here, I'm saying to the world that this is a theory, this is what I believe, this is why I'm doing this. But what I don't think Dr. Aric in this situation understands, as well as many other doctors out there who use just the abstracts and very short parts of the scientific research to justify their claims, is that they are making specific claims, and they tell others what to do based off this research that is very weak. So basically, they're backing up someone else's theory in the world and justifying it as the almighty truth.
Can you still grow muscle while fasting? Yeah, you probably can if you're strength training regularly and your protein consumption's high. But if you really wanted to squeeze the last few drops out of the dish rag, you would also add frequent high protein meals to your day.
So I personally don't agree with his statement here, and as I mentioned, I haven't found anything that refutes my theory that I listed earlier. So I am always looking for data, especially from high authority people, to either prove or disprove my theory, because I'm literally basing everything that I'm doing off of this. I'm hyper curious and I want to find the latest data. So after watching his video and Disagreeing with the claim he made, I asked him, what about growth hormone production in regards to intermittent fasting? Studies I have seen state that fasting for 20 to 24 hours in men leads to a 1,500 to 2,000% increase in natural growth hormone levels. Does increased growth hormone not affect testosterone, which in turn affects the amount of muscle you can gain? I personally believe eating frequent times during the day reduces your overall growth hormone levels you could be getting, in turn affecting testosterone and leading to less possible muscle growth. Is this belief incorrect? He responds by saying, thank you for the question. Briefly, no, most of the above is not true. Prolonged periods of fasting is not optimum for maximizing hypertrophy. One can grow while fasting, just not optimum. So I then asked him, can you give a little more than a brief answer, please? You just said it's not true. What data do you have to justify your statement? Because you're saying here that growth hormone doesn't increase testosterone levels and that testosterone doesn't affect muscle growth. If you can't explain this logically and with data, I can only assume that you don't know what you're talking about and you are parroting words from a textbook. And as you can see there, we have Alexander Pollock in the comments section as well. I want to give a shout out to Alexander because we were literally having this exact discussion a day or two before this on Instagram, where he didn't agree with what I said. And when he presented data to me, I showed him that it doesn't really justify what he's trying to claim. And it really doesn't show anything long term. It's only showing these very short things where they're going right down to the cell and trying to prove this stuff. Where this whole thing, our whole body works as a system together. When you amplify your growth hormone, it's going to affect other things. So I was actually very happy that Alexander joined in here. And again, I wanted to give him a quick shout out because again, we were having this exact discussion and we were both led to the conclusion that there's not enough data or research to justify either side. So as of right now, we're all still just experimenting in this world. But we both want to find some research or some data that proves either side. So Dr. Aric then follows up by saying there isn't any quality data to support the notion that transient increases in growth hormone from fasting translates to superior muscle hypertrophy. And then he presents a piece of data summarizing key components to maximizing hypertrophy and states, at present, there is no quality data suggesting hormone changes in relation to fasting translate to superior hypertrophic adaptation. And no diet type has shown to have special anabolic benefit. One can grow muscle while fasting, just not to optimum. Which again, didn't fully answer my question in here and in turn didn't disprove my theory at all. Now, if you guys want to understand a little bit better on why I believe it's very important to be optimizing our hormone levels, especially our growth hormone, and how that affects our testosterone, go check out the video in the description box below called Stop Worrying About Testosterone. Now, I'm not going to go through our whole discussion here. If you guys are interested, you can see in the blog post that, again, is in the description box below. But from here, I share a study to justify myself and my claim, and I then break down and challenge the study that he shared, which shows the study's reviewed analysis generally involved in suboptimal protein intakes consumed as part of a low-energy diet. I'm sorry, Dr. Aric, but that study does not justify your claim against intermittent fasting or disprove my point here. The main factor and point of the scientific article that you shared to prove your point shows the test subjects are going through suboptimal protein intake. I then share from the same study that he used, cross-sectional area showed similar increases in both groups despite the 20-hour fasting cycles and concentrated feeding cycles in time-restricted feeding, suggesting that the utilization of protein intake in the ad libitum 4-hour feeding cycles was not hampered by an acute ceiling of anabolism. So, if I understand here correctly, Dr. Aric, the study you shared to challenge my point shows that people who did intermittent fasting versus people who didn't do intermittent fasting had similar increases in muscle growth? Strange. It almost sounds like the study you use proves me correct and doesn't support your claim. I then follow it up by presenting another point from the article that he shared, which again actually supports my claims. So I then informed him that I would like him to please present some scientific studies and data that 100% justifies the claims that he's making in this video, and he's telling other people what to do in the world by utilizing his position of authority as a doctor and paying for an advertisement on his video, or he could just admit that he was wrong here. But if he didn't do either, he was going to have 7 days before I created this video here, which you are currently watching. Well, you can probably guess what happened and what a man in a position of authority as his does when they've been discredited in a public forum. They try to hide any evidence that it ever took place. Yep, he deleted my comments, and following that, Alexander actually questioned him on why he deleted the comments, which Dr. Aric ended up deleting that as well. So honestly, this is very sad to me. This is extremely irresponsible from a man in a position of authority as his. He either doesn't look at the research he is using to make these claims, or he doesn't actually understand it. Either way, I've noticed this in the past where doctors and dietitians and scientists or people in a position of authority make these bold claims, and when challenged to actually justify themselves, they regularly get proven wrong and then hide it when that happens. So in this situation here, we have a man, a doctor, in a position of authority taking care of people here in my own city who is basically talking out of his ass, using studies that I honestly don't think he fully read, or else he probably wouldn't have used it in an attempt to justify his claims in the first place. I believe he, like many of these men with letters beside their names, they high-level read through the abstracts of this scientific data and utilize them in their papers and research to appear as they know what they are saying, when they really don't, or they don't actually care to dive into it. Now again, I have no intention to try to ruin this man's reputation, but I believe this is ridiculous and needs to be called question to. How can we allow a man in a position of authority, a doctor, use scientific research he hasn't fully looked into to make a statement and claim like you can't build muscle optimally with intermittent fasting, when none of the research he uses justifies it, and he's not stating openly that this is just something he believes from the research that he has seen. Doctors need to be held accountable when they make false statements like this, and I honestly believe the whole rhetoric of doctors needs to change. I don't know how it needs to change. I don't think that's my job or role in this world. I'm here to point out these ridiculous notions and these ridiculous things that are going on in the world. When people are contradicting themselves, I'm here to challenge it and fully dive into that research. Figuring out what is the best way, I don't have an answer for here. I don't know how doctors need to talk to their patients. But I believe that they need to change the way they phrase themselves, because let's face it, we're all just human beings here. You are not more special than me because you went to school for 6 years. You can only state what you believe from the current research we have, and the ones they use to justify themselves on growth hormone, I will rip apart in the next video that I do on Lane Norton, or BioLane, on his article on growth hormone. So thank you very much to everyone who watched this video, and again, I have no intention to try to ruin this man's reputation, but this needs to be called question to. My goal with this video is solely to prove and show that doctors shouldn't be 100% trusted just because they have some letters beside their names and they spend some time in school. They can also be ignorant as they are only aware to the recent data that is out there or that has been presented to them. And did you know that in the 60s, the sugar industry paid scientists to play down the link between sugar and heart disease, and they actually promoted saturated fat as the culprit instead? Yeah, the Sugar Research Foundation, known as the Sugar Association today, paid 3 Harvard scientists in the 60s to publish a host of studies where they purposely manipulated the results to lead to a desired outcome. So just because there is a scientific study out there, it doesn't mean that it's legitimate. And there could be other factors playing into it, like the one Dr. Aric used here, where the study was more focused on suboptimal protein intake. It had nothing to do with comparing an intermittent fasting diet or lifestyle to a 4 to 8 small meal lifestyle. They purposely lowered their protein intake. That was the main factor there. Yet Dr. Aric uses that as an almighty claim as to why you shouldn't be doing intermittent fasting to grow muscle. So don't forget, if you guys are interested, if you enjoyed this video, you want to see me break down more doctors, scientific studies, and the bullshit that they're using out there, get ready, because as I mentioned, I'm going to break down Lane Norton's article on growth hormone that I found several people used as their own evidence for justifying their claims. But once again, when we dive into the scientific studies that Lane uses, they're very weak. Like for instance, 3 of the studies that he uses to justify that growth hormone supplementation doesn't affect muscle growth in healthy men were done from 1994, 1995, and 1996, which is over 20 to 25 years ago. It was done on a very small sample groups of about 20 people, and again, half of those were being placebo, and done on elderly men over the age of 65. So, he basically stretches very far, in my opinion, to find any sort of data that will support his claims. And I'm going to rip those claims and that data apart. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like what I saw here today, I'd love to know your opinion. Go leave it in the comments section below. And on the way down there, why don't you go smash that like button. I am the Hungarian experiment.
Choose the feeding pattern that makes you happy, including if it's intermittent fasting. But if your number one goal is to grow muscle, you may want to consider adding more frequent, higher protein meals 3 or 4 times throughout your day.